Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everybody. Thank you for tuning into another Supatease video. And today we are going to ask the AI to design a battleground for World of Warcraft because we know that it has been a really long time since we have gotten a new battleground, and one of the most recent ones was disabled from rated play due to bugs. And it really feels like there's gotta be a point at which they need to put a new battleground into World of Warcraft. So let's see if AI can do the job and what it can come up with. So design a battleground for World of Warcraft. And let's see what it is able to conceive, conceptualize, and create. Designing a battleground for World of Warcraft requires consideration of various factors such as themes, objectives, layout, terrain, and potential gameplay mechanics. Here is a potential concept for a battleground: the Forgotten Ruins, an ancient crumbling fortress in a dense jungle. The objectives. The battleground would have two primary objectives for each team: to capture and hold 3 points in the ruins, and to locate and retrieve an ancient artifact from the central chamber of the fortress. The layout. The Forgotten Ruins would consist of a series of interconnected chambers and corridors within the fortress's walls, with the central chamber being the ultimate objective for both teams. The 3 capture points would spread throughout the fortress, requiring players to navigate a maze of hallways, staircases, and outdoor courtyards to reach and hold them. The terrain would be diverse, including dense jungle foliage, broken walls, and perilous drops. I really like where this is going. Gameplay mechanics. In addition to capturing points, players would need to navigate traps and obstacles within the fortress, such as spike pits, tripwires, and falling debris. The central chamber would be locked at the start of the battle, requiring each team to locate and retrieve a key from a randomly spawned boss enemy within the ruins. The artifact within the central chamber would be heavily guarded by powerful AI-controlled monsters, requiring a coordinated team effort to defeat them and retrieve the artifact. The Forgotten Ruins would provide a challenging and exciting battleground for World of Warcraft players, requiring a mix of strategic planning and fast-paced combat skills to emerge victorious. Really interesting. They're taking a lot of risks with this battleground design, like traps and spike pits and tripwires and falling debris for players to run through. This idea of a ruins that you're connecting through, controlling 3 bases and getting to a boss, something that I've really wanted to be incorporated, honestly. We have a brawl that a lot of people might not be aware of. It's called like the Shadow Pan Showdown or something, where both teams fight to control the center, and it spawns a boss, and the first team to kill the boss wins the game. And I actually thought that this is something that should have been iterated more on into the future. I love the idea of merging player versus player and PvE mechanics to engage in meaningful combat, because when you think about it in the world, right, for world PvP, someone's fighting a monster and you engage on them and you get combat out of it over this objective. There's something about that interaction and merger of those two types of content that could create a completely new battleground experience. It's honestly pretty generic. You know, the Forgotten Ruins, there's nothing specific to the lore of the game, and that type of stuff would have to be sorted out in this case. But I actually like that it's taken a little bit of a risk here. It's got mazes. Now, whether or not the mazes would remain mazes for very long, considering the first time you ran through it. Also, it talks about fighting in corridors, really close and narrow areas. Might be problematic considering how much AoE there is in the game. You'd probably get blasted, but I don't mind having a couple of choke points in a battleground and players strategically maneuvering around them to bait enemies into them and capture them with AoE crowd control. I think that choke points can create some really cool competitive gameplay, but if the entire thing is just a choke point and it's really tough to move around, you're going to be highly susceptible to AoE and just completely getting destroyed. I'm not entirely sure how I feel about it. I really like the way that it's envisioned the battleground, with certain areas slightly outside with decaying walls until we get to the center chamber where the boss is spawned. And what does it mean by randomly spawned boss? Like, is it gonna is it just going to create mechanics on the fly? You never know what type of boss is going to be in the center until you get to it, or that type of deal, which could be pretty cool because it's like you got to be on the fly, figure out what's going on. You can't just memorize the mechanics and go into it with an expected result. You got to anticipate and figure out what's going on while you're playing, which is something for me at least that PvE has been missing. Oftentimes it just becomes repetitive. You know what's going to be happening, you know what the outcome is going to be. So meeting a boss for the first time that has randomly generated mechanics that you need to figure out on the fly while you're engaging with other players controlling objectives could actually be really cool as a concept. So I would honestly be really excited to try out a Battleground like this. It's kind of crazy how much of like it gets your creativity going just by typing in a couple of words here into the AI. The only thing I'm wondering is whether or not this is potentially plagiarized from something. I don't know if anybody knows from other games if this sounds really familiar to something that has already happened and if it's potentially plagiarizing. But for me personally, seeing this, it seems pretty unique, and I can't for the life of me figure out anything that has done something like this where it's including both PvE and PvP, indoor and outdoor, utilizing traps for the first time. This idea of like maybe you're luring an enemy and then the roof's about to come down and it comes down and stuns them or something and can give you a little bit of an extra advantage. This idea of like environment interaction could be a lot of fun. It might be really frustrating for a rated experience, so maybe this is better left as just a random Battleground, but I would really like some risks, honestly, to be taken when it comes to WoW PvP, because it's always just been the same old class interactions with each other, capture a flag, capture a base, having some more interactions with the map and trying to lure players into certain areas of the map or being aware of how it's changing around you actively could be really fun and engaging gameplay. Whether or not it's actually achievable or could happen is really an entirely other debate, right? Because I have no idea if they've got the API or whatever it is that's required to generate this type of content, but it's pretty cool to just kind of think about it and get moving forward and try to figure out how we can get more Battlegrounds into the game. I know for myself personally, one of the biggest letdowns is that there wasn't a dragon riding Battleground. So let's see if the AI can generate a dragon riding Battleground. Generate a dragon riding Battleground for World of Warcraft. I'm really curious what this can come up with. Sure, here's a potential concept for a dragon riding Battleground in World of Warcraft. Dragon's Peak, a treacherous snow-covered mountain peak where two warring factions are vying for control. The main objective of the Battleground would be to capture and hold the peak, a massive plateau at the top of the mountain. Players would need to use their dragons to take control of the plateau and fend off enemy attacks to maintain control. Dragon's Peak would consist of several tiers, of which of each team starting at opposite ends of the mountain. To reach the peak, players would need to fly their dragons through narrow canyons, dodge falling rocks, and navigate through dangerous winds. This is absolutely... Why is this not in the game? The Battleground would have a few key strategic points, such as outposts, where players can restock and repair their dragons. And so it doesn't know 100% how dragons work, which would be an elevated area that allows players to engage in combat on foot or on dragon back. That would be interesting if you could use your abilities while flying. Again, it seems like it's not 100% up to date with Dragon Ride, but I really like the concept of a peak and you're climbing and dismounting each other, trying to reach to the top and stand on it and control it as long as possible. I think that could be really fun. Gameplay mechanics. The key mechanic for this Battleground would be the ability to fly on dragons. Players would have to use their flying mounts to engage in aerial combat, with different types of dragons having unique abilities such as Fire Breath. So it's coming up with abilities for the dragons here in the Battleground. Frost Breath or Wing Gust to knock back enemies. Players would also be able to jump off their dragons to engage in combat on foot. Holding the peak would give the team access to powerful weaponry such as ballista or catapults, which they can use to defend or attack enemy positions. Love that concept. Really like that, trying to like aim and shoot down dragons that are trying to come up to the top of the peak. Overall, Dragon's Peak would provide a unique and exciting Battleground for World of Warcraft players, requiring mastery of dragon riding skills, teamwork, and strategic planning to achieve victory. Man, it just came up with like the most phenomenal concept. It doesn't have the best idea of how the dragons work, but it's obviously going to open up opportunities to maybe try some different things with what the dragons could do in a Battleground with these types of possibilities. if I were reading this as like a feature, release, I would get pretty stoked about this overall in terms of getting to play. And like all it took was typing it here into the AI, and it's coming up, and I can conceptualize it, I can visualize it, I can see like players trying to fly up to the top and getting shot down while they're getting up there, and then they're fighting each other at the top to try and get control of it so that their side can win. Like it's both simple and complex. Like it's a beautiful mixture of both. I would honestly love to see this play out in reality. So we got two different Battleground ideas. We got one that's more of a standard one. We got a dragon riding Battleground potentially out of this. So I'm really hoping they're going to come up with a Battleground. It seems like they don't want to because there's too many maps or something and they're worried about it. But honestly, maybe rotating some maps away that are of battles that aren't really as relevant anymore, or having a cycle of Battlegrounds every week like they've done with arena maps for solo shuffle. So week by week, it's interchanging maps would be a better way of dealing with it rather than just never adding a new one, because it seems like there's a lot of people that would like to have new Battlegrounds, and like this thing just came up with some pretty insane concepts, just like right off the fly. Not to like down talk, obviously, the creativity of the human possibilities, but like I got myself excited just reading this, that it just spat out of the void of the internet. So very interesting, very exciting video. I hope that you guys enjoyed it here. Hopefully we're going to get some news on a Battleground for World of Warcraft that will get me as excited as reading what the AI has typed here. So thank you very much for watching, and I will catch you in the next video.